And away we go.
I see the record button. All right. We would like to formally welcome everyone to our Summer Institute session on personalized learning with ed tech. This session will focus on using Nearpod for really to bring up your presentation styles in a remote learning setting and for formative assessment purposes. My name is Patricia Hilliard and I am your session host. I will be supporting your session. Even though we won't be in Zoom formally, our Zoom will still be running. So if you have any questions or any technical issues with seeing the presentation, because this is a presentation about Nearpod and Brooke, our presenter, is going to be taking us to Nearpod, but just know that your Zoom will still be working. I think Brooke calls that stacking of some kind, where we're using an app that's
smashing.
App smashing, that's what it is. I'm gonna get the language soon. App smashing, so just know that your Zoom is still working. If you have any issues, you can place them in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat the entire time. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to your presenter for this session right now, and that is Brooke.
Good afternoon, everyone. I see some familiar faces out there, and it's nice to have you all here. Like Tricia said, we're just a couple of things. Most of us are probably pretty familiar with this already. We would appreciate that you keep yourselves on mute while you aren't speaking. However, this is a pretty small group today, so we can be a little more informal. If you have some questions or if you're having issues as we're working through Nearpod, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask a question or put those in the chat like Tricia said. So you'll see the mute button down at the bottom of the screen. Also your video, start and stop video button if you would love to show your face and participate here with us in this small group. Just turn that video on by clicking on the camera there. And we will be going out of Zoom, out of the full screen. So you can click escape and you should be able to see your tabs there and open up a new tab and go to Nearpod. So we'll do that in just a minute. The materials are there for you. I think John already shared a link in the chat box. They're on the Virtual Summer Institute website. Just a few materials are there. The slide presentation from today, and there are links to some resources that I thought you might use to personalize your Nearpod instructions. So there are just some helpful blog links and other things that are on there that we can go over later at the end of the session. And our goals for today are to be able to understand the Nearpod platform through a sample lesson, and then just really apply the capabilities that Nearpod has to personalize learning and formative assessment in your classrooms. We want to be able ultimately to create a lesson in Nearpod and be able to use that to personalize learning for our students, whether it's in the classroom or through distance learning, whatever we may encounter next school year. So we're going to go over the Nearpod approach to teaching. We're going to dive right into a sample lesson. So I'm going to immerse you as students first and kind of talk through some of the moves that a teacher can make through the lesson. And then we're going to apply SAMR to creating your own Nearpod lesson. So if you joined us on the Flipgrid session, I see several of you who are also there. We're not going to dive into that as deeply, but just a brief overview of SAMR and then how we can apply that to our Nearpod lessons. And then we probably won't have time to create a lesson, but I'm going to give you some resources and some tips on where you could get started with that. And just reflect and have some extended time for questions and answers, personalized help if you need that. So some of you may be familiar with Nearpod already. Some of you may be asking, what's a Nearpod? So this is just an interactive slideshow tool that's going to help you support learning in a variety of ways in your classroom. You can create original presentations or choose from ones that are already created. It just really is engaging for students. I think it promotes collaboration and provides a lot of feedback that you can use on the spot or to plan for the next day. So without further ado, we're just going to dive right into there. So we're going to start with the sample lesson. So you can do this in a couple of ways. And if you're feeling really hesitant about this and tech just isn't your thing, you can absolutely just stay here with me on Zoom and see the teacher view. You don't have to go anywhere. But if you would like to participate today, you feel comfortable with that, you can use your other device like a phone to scan that QR code, and you can work from your phone. You can also hit escape to exit full screen on Zoom, and then just open up a new tab. So just hit escape. You should be able to see your tabs. You see all my various tabs. And then you can go over and hit the plus sign and open up a new tab and go to join.nearpod.com. You can also, if you're really tech savvy and you want to open a new window there, you can pop that out and open a new window so that you can see Zoom and Nearpod side by side. So I'm going to give you a minute to do that. And if we're having any struggles with that, just either unmute yourself or just add your question or what problems you're having in the chat. But we're just going to go over to join.nearpod.com. And you should enter a code there. And I've got to go in and just open this live lesson back up on my teacher account. So please let me know if you're having any problems joining the session with the code that's provided. I started this live lesson last night so that I could get the code, and then I exited out of it. So I've never actually resumed a live lesson. So I'm hoping there are no problems. But if you're still looking on my screen, you can see that if you were using this in your classroom, you could project this on your smartboard. You could also share this link to your Google Classroom, so you could just have students, if they're used to going into Google Classroom or Remind or wherever you usually go, they could go in there more easily and just click on the link, or you can share the link however you usually do that. So you have a few options for sharing.
And Brooke, I just want to mention to them, it looks like people are getting in. When
Okay.
you are in, you are a student. What you are looking at from Zoom, from Brooke, is the teacher. So just be able to move your brain back and forth, or like me, I'm just going to sit back and watch the teacher version, but you're going to be getting the behind the scenes and the student experience all at once.
So it looks like we have about 18 people who are there already. Is that probably just about everyone? Okay. So we'll go ahead and begin, and if you have any problems, just let us know and we can pause and talk about them. Okay, so the first thing that you should see as we begin the lesson is just a question. This is a poll type question. This is just something you can use to gauge where your class is at, incorporate prior understanding, and just to set the stage. So the question is, how familiar are you with Nearpod? And we can see the responses rolling in if you're still looking at my Zoom screen. As the teacher, I can immediately see the results. And I see about half of us are familiar with Nearpod. 26% have used it already. And we have about 10 who say, what the heck is a Nearpod? So we're gonna find out today. So again, that's just a good way to begin the class, gauge where your students are at, and look at that prior understanding. So our objectives, we already went over, so I'm going to skip that. And I'm going to skip the agenda. So next year, you're probably seeing a picture of a classroom and the option to create a caption or an annotation for this picture. So this is a draw it slide. That means that you can use, you have certain tools that you can use to draw on the picture. You can add text. I think you can even add things like stickers and emojis, but it's just create a caption looking at the picture. How would you caption or annotate this picture? Okay, so I'm seeing there. If I wanted to share out to the class, like if I found a good response that I wanted to share out, I have the option to do that. I just click share, and you guys should be all seeing that on your screens now. So you see pre-corona, which is nice to think about. We also see lots of responses dealing with collaboration, partner collaboration. So just looking at some of the things that technology makes possible. You see the students, I saw a lot of people saying hard at work, working away. You can notice that the teacher there working with individual students while partners are working. So just some really good things to think about. How tech is a means to an end. And so Nearpod is designed to help teachers meet their goals and teach and assess more effectively while engaging their students. So you could see that could be possible with technology. All right, and now we're going to talk about the Nearpod approach to teaching. So just some of the features and some of the strategies that Nearpod helps teachers incorporate. After we look at a few slides, you're going to be asked a question. I always like to know in advance what I'm looking for. So you're going to be asked what resonated with you the most and why. And here are the slides. So if you're looking at my screen, you see that I have a bunch of slides here. This is one of the only screens that Nearpod doesn't control in the student view. So to see the other slides, you will need to scroll down and actually click on those other thumbnails so that you can see those slides. So this is like a slideshow within the slideshow that you can add in. And students have the ability to toggle back and forth on those slides. So remember, you're just thinking, what resonated the most with you? I'll give you a few more seconds to just take a look at those slides, and then we will move over. You can add your response there. Okay, so you should see a question now based on your thoughts. What resonated the most with you about the Nearpod approach to teaching and why? And this is an open-ended question, so you may type your response. If you're still with me on Zoom looking at the teacher screen, you can see something that I just did. I clicked hide student names. So that's something to remember if you are using your smart board as you scroll through this. You can hide student names so the students don't have to worry about being linked to their answers or embarrassed to respond. And if we see a model response that we like, we can share it out to all of our students. Just really easily by clicking the share button. So you should be seeing this response on your screen. Seems very engaging. We get immediate feedback, which allows us to quickly step in. Then I can unshare it. And you can also see the percentage of your class that is participating in this to get 100% student engagement. So you can see those who haven't submitted their answers yet. Well, I like this response. Technology allows students to engage and collaborate at the same time. Students can also contribute to a lesson anonymously, which helps the reluctant participants feel comfortable. Have interaction with each student. Using technology as a means to an end, begin with the end in mind. When planning and designing a Nearpod lesson, think about your students' needs and what goals and learning outcomes that you have in mind. So that's something that's really great to think about anytime you're using technology, is using that as a means to an end, not just using technology to be using it, but what's your purpose, what's your why, and how is this going to help your students become more successful with that. All right, so we've looked at some of the key features, and there's a sample lesson here that I just downloaded from the Nearpod library that I thought we would run through just to see some of the other features. And some of them we might skip through very quickly. Obviously, no one's getting graded on this lesson today or anything like that. So there are lots of activities in here. I just wanted you to see what's possible, but I also want to spend some time really talking about this in the context of SAMR and personalized learning. So we're going to go through this a little quickly. I'm sure you'll appreciate that. So sample lesson, again, I just downloaded this from the Nearpod library. As we're looking through this lesson though, and this is a lesson that would be used with students, middle school students. But I would just like you to think about how can your lesson be improved by using technology? How can you engage and empower students through technology? And how online learning can more closely resemble authentic real world learning. So what are some of the features that Nearpod has that make this possible? And the lesson is about dealing with challenges. Something really neat about the Nearpod library is that you can download some free pre-made slideshows and edit those yourself. They have a lot of great SEL type lessons, so I thought it would be neat to think about that as well. So dealing with challenges. How do we handle challenges in our learning will be our essential question for our lesson today. So we'll begin with the brain challenge. It says turn to a partner. I don't know about you. I don't have a partner here at my house right now, but maybe turn to your cat or your pretend partner or whoever's there with you. On the next slide in the slideshow, just quickly say the colors you see in every word, not the word itself. So that's a little tricky. Say the colors that you see in every word, not the word itself. And have your partner share with you how many you got right. So we'll just pretend that we can do that. And you can scroll down and see the slides. And since you're all on mute, you could actually try that out loud if you want to. So it's the actual color, not what the word says. And I'll give you like 20 seconds to see how many you can get. So I don't know about you, but I struggled when I tried to do that. So was it easier for your brain to identify the color of the word or the word itself? So what did you want to do? So again, you weren't supposed to read what the word actually said, but I found that a little challenging. So did you think it was easier to identify the color of the word or the word itself? You could just respond in the poll there. You should be seeing the results for the class. So most of you who responded said the word itself. It was easier to identify the word. And I found that to be true as well. I found it really difficult to try to say the color of the word. And so this slide would then just, so that would be like your little activator, you're getting started with the lesson. And this slide is going to provide content for your students to learn. Something that's neat about this is that you can actually do
growing a mind. Our minds are constantly growing and developing. Think about the activity you just completed.
So you can add audio to the slides and have that read to the students. So that's a really good way to provide some accommodations for students, especially if they're working through this individually in the student pace mode. So the lesson tells us that our minds grow when we face a challenge, our mind stretches in its abilities, and then talks about two types of mindsets, which I'm sure we're probably pretty familiar with. The fixed mindset and the growth mindset. Again, if I wanted to play the audio for you, I could do that, but I'm just going to let you guys take that in and read it. No pressure, but there is a quiz at the end. And then overcoming challenges. Think about the ways that the strategies that you have to encourage your brain to stay in growth mode. And you could partner your students up and have them explore some slides, like in this slideshow. So this is just providing different strategies that people can use to overcome challenges. And I'll give you just about 1 minute to look at those slides. And again, you'll have to toggle through those as the student. That is one thing that the teacher does not control in this type of presentation.
And Brooke, we have a question in the chat. Just let me know when
Okay.
you're ready. The question in the chat is about how iPads, sadly, are becoming more outdated. And more students are using Chromebooks. Would it be easier for them to stand near their computers to implement this? Just curious. From Kristen.
Yeah, let me think about that. So I think that, yes, students, ideally to do this live lesson with students, they would each have a device, whether that be a Chromebook or a mobile device or whatever you can use to access the internet. I think ideally students would have their own devices. And so then you could sit them individually, you could have them work with partners. If you have limited devices, this lesson incorporates some partner work, so you could do that. I also saw just some good ideas about, like, before you have your students respond to the open-ended responses, maybe do like a turn and talk, so you're incorporating more collaboration with students and they're not just sitting there at their devices going through. So, but definitely students would need a device in order to participate, whether it be an iPad or a Chromebook. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and also Dana Woods said that it does work with Chromebooks. I think it's just a matter of students having access. So thank you. Yeah, I think it does. I don't want to speak for Kristen, but yes.
Okay. And there's also on the resources page, there is a link to a blog entry about how to make this work when you have limited technology, with some really interesting ideas. And right off the top of my head, other than partnering them, I can't remember, but I do know maybe incorporating this with small groups. So looking at, maybe you're not doing whole group instruction, maybe you're using this with a targeted group of students, maybe you're doing rotations. Classes.
Okay.
Good questions. Any more? Now would be a really good time to tell me.
Yes.
Slow down.
Dana Woods had a question about, do you know of a way to access the teacher version on a mobile device instead of a computer?
I have not used it with my mobile device in a classroom, just because I typically use the teacher computer at the workstation. I do know that it's supposed to function with a mobile device, so that might be something to try out. I'm sorry, not 100% sure about that, but I do know that it should. I'm trying it right now, actually. Any other questions?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, so we'll just go ahead and move on, because I do want to get to some other things. So this question just asks you, which strategy did you connect the most with and why? And if you would want to just type a quick response in there. I know there is a Nearpod app. All right, so we just see a few responses, and we're gonna go ahead and move along. I think you get the idea of that. Another neat feature that Nearpod has is a virtual reality option. So you can incorporate virtual reality field trips. I found this to be really fun and helpful in classes like social studies. We could go and explore some of the just ancient sites that are discussed in the text. I saw a lot of really neat ideas for this in math, just trying to connect to real world problems, even if you're looking for like geometric shapes, or just using it to engage students first, to get them thinking, and then even building word problems from what they're seeing there. So I think that there are a lot of neat possibilities for that. But you can take a virtual reality field trip. So this can be done on devices or with a VR headset if you had something like that. I know I was in a couple of schools that had like 1 or 2 of those to check out. So students can just like pan around, check it out. I think this is pretty neat. It allows them to see places that they wouldn't normally be able to see. So I'll give you a second to check that out. And then also you're going to see the draw it feature. So you can upload anything that you want to make it the background of one of these draw it questions. And then you can just ask students to respond by drawing. There are lots of possibilities with this. I know if you're thinking about like science, maybe labeling diagrams and things like that. Even with math, showing their students showing their work or drawing different, drawing out different equations. I think you could upload a graph. You have blank graph paper there. So we can see all of the different possibilities here. I love these faces. You can share the responses with students again. Oh, someone feels stressed. That hair, I think, looks like my hair when I get stressed. Okay, so we see the idea there. Does anyone need more time for their masterpiece?
And Brooke, is there a way of filtering that? I mean, we're talking about middle schoolers and drawing. Is there a way that if someone has something that's not appropriate, it could be fixed?
Well, yes, I can only see if I share it. So what I'm looking at on my screen is the teacher view. So I would just probably not project that onto my smart board, but then just share out those appropriate responses, and always remind students that their names are linked. They seem to forget that sometimes. So even though they're hidden right now, I can see who's who. So I can go down here and just show the names. But that's a good question, because we know middle school students. We love them, but we know where they tend to go sometimes. Good question. And then just to check for understanding, just to show you the quiz feature here for formative assessment. There are 3 little quiz questions. So if you wouldn't mind just to submit those, if you don't even have to click the correct answers. If you don't want to, just click, and we can see then the breakdown of how the teacher gets to view those responses and the data there. You could use this as an exit ticket so that you know what students know and what they don't when they leave the classroom that day. You could use something like this as a pre-assessment at the beginning of a lesson and then split students up into small groups based on that. So you just really have this automatic feedback. You don't have to sit around and grade that. That's one thing that I really love about that. You could use this on the fly and just go back and readjust, modify your instruction based on where your students are at with their knowledge at that very moment. You could highlight misconceptions and compare and share student answers. And I can share the data with you. Also, as the teacher, I can get a report sent to my email. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then hopefully if I have time, I'll show you what that looks like. You can also just go back in and access the data reports. So that's just the gist of what a lesson may look like with Nearpod, and I know we went through that really quickly, but I just wanted to show you some of the key features and have you experience that yourselves from the student point of view, or if you're watching with me, what the teacher might be seeing. So what questions do we have at this point before we move on? Any like takeaways or aha moments or ways that you immediately see that you might be able to use this in your classroom?
There was a question, but Dana answered it, but I'll just put it out there for the entire group. Can Nearpod be used as an independent lesson and still collect all this information, say for distance learners? And the answer was yes.
Yes. Now, there is a caveat with that. They made this feature free through June the 30th. There are different tiers of the Nearpod plan. So with a free membership, it is my understanding that you cannot do the student-paced lessons with a free membership typically. They've made it free during COVID time, but to be able to do student-paced lessons, you would need a gold membership, which costs a little over $100 a year for an individual teacher account. And then of course there's district and school pricing as well if you wanted to get accounts for your building. But then there's like a step up from that, which is a platinum account, and that gives you access to every single lesson that they have in the library for free, so you can download and customize those as you like. So those are the big differences between the plans. Also, I think there are some small differences as far as how many students can participate with each tier. I think with free, I think it's like 40, so it probably should be enough for any class size that you have. Platinum goes up, and then storage is also a difference. But the key difference really is that student pace mode, which, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure that it's only available typically for the paid plans. And I was going to talk about that later, but that's a really good question.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I think that answers John Grant's question about, is it affordable? So I think we're good.
Okay, so just thinking about this, just transitioning now to thinking about how we're actually going to put this to work in the classroom now that you've seen a little bit of what it can do. And there are certainly other features that I didn't show you, and if we have time, I'll show you some more. But just thinking about this through the lens of SAMR, and really focusing on those questions. How can my lesson be improved with technology? How can I engage and empower my students? And how can online learning more closely resemble the authentic real world learning that's going on in our classrooms if we're thrown back into distance learning next year? So what are some things that we can do to make that more like the learning that's going on in the classroom? And I think that this is a much more engaging way to give a presentation. Of course, I could get on Zoom and give you the Google Slides presentation, but it just makes it a little bit easier to be more interactive. So a little more interaction than just like the Zoom chat box, obviously. But there are some other things that maybe you want to think about as well. And I've been having problems with this. Can anyone see, is anything loading on your screen, or do you just have the sad face that I have? Is it just the sad face, Trisha?
I'm watching you.
Yeah, just
Oh,
a sad face. That's all I see.
okay. All right. I anticipated that. So there was
Paige said sad
a
face
version of
as
this,
well.
like an interactive version, but for some reason it doesn't want to pull up on here. So looking back at SAMR, and for some of you who weren't with me on the Flipgrid presentation, just looking at this as looking at tech use through this model, the SAMR model. So looking at, are we using tech through the lens of just pure substitution? Are we augmenting what's possible with tech? Are we modifying the task? So going a little bit beyond and doing something that we couldn't really do. And then redefining, are we completely transforming what's possible through the use of tech? So obviously, and that's a really brief, like bad explanation of that. I have a good article on the references list if you're interested in learning more about the SAMR model, but just for the sake of time, just the breakdown there. Tricia, would you add anything else to that?
No, you're good.
Okay, so just looking at, we could use this just as a pure substitution for a regular presentation, right? We could, and there are some really great features, like you can just upload any presentations that you have in Google Slides or PowerPoint and Nearpodize your presentation. So you're just adding in those engaging activities to the things that you already have. We could do that. We could also look at ways that this is going to redefine and modify what's possible for our students. So thinking through things like distance learning, smashing this with Zoom or some other apps, Google Meet, and being able to be more present with our students without actually being in a physical classroom. Using that VR capability to take them to places that they wouldn't otherwise be able to visit. And then there are some other things, other apps and things that you can integrate that I'll show you in just a minute. So just thinking through that, how can we make our lessons better with tech, not just be using tech just for the sake of using tech. So we can share this fun and interactive content with our students. We can instantly collect and share answers. So we can share out those model answers for students who might need a little more scaffolding and help. We can really track our students' comprehension in real time. So we can use that data to really monitor, readjust in real time and provide them the instruction that they need based on that. And I have a short video in which a teacher does a much better job of explaining how he uses it in his classroom. So I'm going to play that for you, and hopefully the audio will work because John helped me set this up ahead of time.
I've been teaching 35 years. Just the technology in the last 2 or 3 years I think has just dramatically changed how I teach. Nearpod is so different from like a PowerPoint presentation. I would have a lot of old PowerPoint presentations and it was good, okay, but with Nearpod I can have my kids sit in a circle and I have eye contact with each one. I have a relationship with each kid. It's a group setting, it's a discussion setting, and the kids are interacting. They're actually drawing things, they're actually writing things down, they're thinking exactly what the kids see. I can see exactly what they understand and what they don't understand, so I can assess right where they are. So much of what is done is lecture. And I see teachers who are fantastic lecturers, and I know the transition into Nearpod would just be easy for them to do. The experience with Nearpod has been fantastic. It has been probably one of the apps that I have used the most. Nearpod definitely, absolutely, is one of the best ways to deliver information.
So I just really liked his idea of having all of his students sit in a circle and use this app, which is something that I hadn't really done in the classrooms that I've used this in. And just the idea of using this to also facilitate that live discussion, which would be something that would be really great if we were able to do that in the fall. And so you have them drawing, you have them just interacting with the virtual reality, you have them interacting with the activities and the content, but then also interacting with each other in a discussion that you facilitate. So I think that's really cool. And then just the capabilities, again, of being able to share out those answers, share out the data live. There are just a lot of possibilities. So something that we touched on a little bit already, you have two options with this. What we're doing right now is a live lesson. So this is a live teacher-paced lesson. So I actually take over your screens and I control the pace that you're taking in the material, the content, and how much time you have to process and then to respond. There's also a student-paced lesson where teachers can assign Nearpod lessons as homework or have students complete them at their own pace. So when we start thinking about personalization, we start thinking about the possibilities with that. So can you assign individual students different presentations? So this student needs to learn about this. This student is good with that, but needs a little more help with this. So the good thing about this is you can easily duplicate your presentations and then just differentiate them. So you could give out different codes. No one really knows who's getting what code. Students can also go back to this for review. They can go back through the lessons at home or wherever they are. So the environment becomes much more flexible, which is one core component of personalized learning, is that flexible environment. And then also just the content that is made available for students.
Brooke, I have a question in the chat from Judy.
Yes.
Speaking of live versus the student-paced session, she had a really great question on do you have any suggestions to getting students connected properly and monitor during the session?
So I think it's to get them connected properly, if I'm understanding that question correctly, it's just sharing that code. So it's really simple for your students to log in. Just go to the website and log in. They can even do it on their devices. So I think that just sharing the code on your screen or putting it on your Google Classroom or whatever you're using regularly. So that hub where students know immediately to go to and just click on the link, I think would make it a lot easier. And then monitoring during the lesson. I'm really interested in the question about using the teacher version on a mobile device. And if anyone's done that, please hop in and let me know, because I haven't done that. But I've been downloading the app on my phone. I'd really like to know if I can, as the teacher, just control it from my phone as I walk around, or like on my phone or an iPad as I walk around and monitor students. I always just like to have my classroom set up in a way that I can stand at the back of the room and I can see all of the students' screens if they're working on computers. Just a personal preference of mine. So that would be one tip I have. Does anyone have anything else that you would add?
Yeah, Dana added something about in sending the direct link in Google Classroom. So they just click on it, but I would also offer that if Nearpod is new to you and new to your students, the first time they would see it may not be for a lesson. It might be just for like, a mini lesson that's not content driven, so they can get the kinks out, they can get the nerves out. I mean, once they're on it, it's a teacher driving, but just give them a little bit of time to figure out how to respond and it not be a quote unquote high stakes lesson. It is just something to orient them to the platform.
That's a really good point. And I really like, that reminds me of Kristen Zemke's digital workshop model that she uses in her book Amplify. And I looked at that a lot as I was planning these tech lessons and just thinking about the initial step around with any new app or tech tool that you're using first before you go hardcore into that lesson of something that you really want them to be able to learn. So that's a really good point. And I'm on the mobile app on my phone, and it looks like I have access to all of the lessons in my library, and I can actually just launch those lessons right from my phone. So it looks like if you had a mobile device that you could just do that and walk around, and that would be like a really great way to engage with that. Any other questions? Okay, so obviously you have a lot of options for content that you can share with your students through this app. I shared some things with you like slides and the Nearpod 3D, but there are all kinds of other things that you can easily add into a presentation when you're creating it yourself. A science teacher who I let test drive with using my account last year. She absolutely loved these PhET simulations. She said they were amazing. And so those are just little labs that you can assign to students. They have them for math and science. They're really neat. So you could check those out. There are a lot of BBC videos on there that you can add in. Something I didn't even know existed, Microsoft Sway, that looks really neat. Tricia and I both liked that. So there are just all kinds of different options for incorporating that multimedia. Something else that I wanted to show you, just because I really thought it was neat, the idea of this and how I might use this template, looking at this summer learning tic-tac-toe. Even if we're not going to use it for summer learning and visiting all the different landmarks, which I think is a really neat idea, just taking this template, which is in your resources document. I linked this. It's in there for you. But just being able to take this template, if you do have access to student-paced versions, you can just go ahead and put those codes in there. And so then students have choice of what lessons they want to complete, and maybe they need to learn about X and they just don't really get it. So they could choose to go to that lesson. So I love the idea of providing a choice board and having those links for, they would have to be linked to student-paced lessons. And that's just another VR example. I loved this, and I added this, and I know I'm running out of time, but I just want to share the story with you. So I used to teach 11th grade ELA, which was American literature, and we had this whole unit on explorer literature, and we read all of these explorers' narratives, and one was about the first European to go to the Grand Canyon and what he wrote about it. And I had, the one student in my class who had actually been to the Grand Canyon, and she brought in a photo, and it was just really cool. Everybody checked it out, and it's just like, oh, the Grand Canyon, because most of my students and I had not been there. And of course we had the computer, but it was just nice to see that photo in person, and she told us all about it. But it was neat to think through, oh, if I had this VR option, also they could have explored it that way. So just a connection to literature. This is the Microsoft Sway that I was talking about. So just another, they have tons of these that you can just add in that are pre-made already, or if you're up on this and you know how to create those yourself, you could create your own and add it in. And this is one of the interactive simulations that I was talking about. This is a math one. So you could choose your level. And I think when I played around with this, I chose level 4, and then I immediately realized that I was not a level 4 on fractions. I had to bump it back down. Maybe I chose the higher level. Hopefully I chose a higher level than that. But you can just take a second and check that out. But I'm going to go with level 1 so I don't embarrass myself. It's just matches. So you just have to match 1/3 and then what would go with that. And then check it. Yay. So there are tons of those that are already pre-made that you can add in to your lessons. You can add any website. This is just a link to a web page. What I like about that is that all of a sudden you're not having to say, now go here, type this link in. And we know that students and a lot of times adults honestly cannot type those links in correctly. So it's just nice to be able to control that. You already have it put in there, takes them right where they need to go. And then thinking about student voice, especially with distance learning, or even if you are in the classroom, just being able to allow students to let their voices be heard. We had a whole session that students can use to record themselves, to respond, and you can actually embed your Flipgrids into a Nearpod, and then your students can see the responses there. So this is our actual real life Flipgrid. I just embedded that. And you might see some faces that you know. Here, so you can just see, I'm getting the teacher view because I'm logged into my account, but you can see the responses there. I just thought that was a really neat app smash for you, Tricia. And then of course there are all kinds of like 3D models and things like that. So just really cool. If you mess around with it, you can see all kinds of different content and engaging multimedia that you can add into your presentations. And then also with the assessment. So thinking through all of your formative assessment possibilities. We experienced most of these today with the open-ended questions. You can really have students elaborate. Another way to help them share their voices with the poll and in the open-ended questions. With the quizzes, then like I mentioned before, you have that automatic feedback, so you can use that live. You can download the report and see who really needs some more one-on-one help. Maybe split them up into small groups based on that, or differentiate your upcoming assignments based on that. So that's another really good way that this helps with personalization. And I'm just wondering if there's anything else that I wanted to mention about that. So I think I was able to just really give you a brief overview of all of that. And this slide is a collaborate board. Just really quickly, I know that we have like 4 minutes left, but if you have just one way that you can, and I'm getting the option here as a teacher to approve this before it's posted or not. I'm going to choose no so that it just goes right on there, but FYI, you can choose to approve before these posts are made. But just what are some ways in which you see this tool is capable of going beyond just pure substitution, just substituting for a presentation to improve your lessons? So how does it allow you to personalize learning, and how can you engage and empower students through this technology? So just a brief response, just a takeaway, just take about 1 minute, because that's really all we have left, to just type that response, and I'd love to see what your thoughts are on this. And feel free to unmute yourself and speak up if you'd rather do that, because we are running a little short on time. So we're seeing the responses roll in, immediate feedback. In a virtual setting for math, we can see student work, which is great. It's very interactive. We use the Collaborate board to analyze text in my history class, and students love the instant interaction. Formative assessment options. The virtual field trips. Great for ESL students, yes, especially with those read aloud options on the slides as well. And the ability to integrate Flipgrid so that they could speak their responses would be really great. A lot of pre-made math lessons. Yeah, those PhET simulations. I asked the science teacher who used this a lot last year, like what was the best thing? And she said that was just amazing. She said they were really well thought out, and she could tell that a lot of time went into those. Exit tickets. All right, so we have a lot of great ideas here. I wish we had time to share more, and I wish we had time to create today, but unfortunately we just had 1 hour. So I have provided the resources for you to be able to create your own if you need some step-by-step assistance. It's all there on the Summer Institute page. There is an audience handout that's a checklist that just walks you through creating your first lesson. So give that a try if you like. And then the other resources that I added on there, it's like a whole list, but I tried to organize them so it wasn't too overwhelming. Just some quick links to, honestly, there are a lot of just like the Nearpod blog entries, but just different ideas for personalizing learning, social emotional learning ideas. Those choice boards, I linked the editable versions of 2 of those for you so that you can just use those and put in your own codes. And then just, I wanted to give you an idea of how to use this in any content area. So I'll link some for science, math, music, RTI. There are a lot of good. If we are doing the virtual learning model next year, just some really good blogs about how Nearpod can help make that a little more engaging and easier. So, oh, and I also linked a student-paced version of the training slides if you want to look back at that. And then the pricing plans and comparisons, if you're interested in a paid version, you can see the differences there. So any questions, last-minute questions?
Brooke, I have a question that for those who haven't used Nearpod, how long would it take on average to put a Nearpod presentation together?
Well, it really just depends on whether you have it finished already as a presentation. It's honestly not much more time than it would take you to just make a Google Slides presentation. And then something else that I didn't even have time to mention, but there's an article link there, is you can actually download and what's it called? What are these little
Extensions?
Yes, sorry. So I have a Nearpod extension on here. So I could actually just click that and then Nearpodize my slides. So I can add those activities right in on Google Slides, or I can do it on the actual Nearpod website. But I just found it to be a lot easier to do it on Google Slides if I already had the presentation made. Plus I just like I don't really like the options for the like backgrounds and the layouts on Nearpod, so I'd personally just rather do it on Google Slides. But it really doesn't take that much more time. Plus, there are tons of like free ones that are made already, and you can just edit those as well. So even if it isn't perfect for you, if you need to add in some other things, you could do that as well. Good question. Any more questions? Well, if you participated in a lot of these sessions, then you pretty much know the drill already, but we do have a feedback and assessment survey that we would really appreciate you completing. And this just allows us to reflect on your thoughts about the session. We're always looking for ways to improve. So, and you especially need to fill this out if you need a certificate of attendance for this session. And I think that'll be open for, is it like 30 minutes, John?
That's correct. 30 minutes after the session ends. That's correct. Thank you.
And the link should be there for you in the Zoom chat. Or if you're still on Nearpod, I actually linked it on there so you can do it directly. Through there, it should pull up for you. That's another great thing that I love. I love Google Forms. I actually turned most of my when I was in the classroom, I turned most of my assessments into Google Forms assessments just because of the data collection and not having to grade all of those multiple choice questions, and I would still include the short answer. But anywho, I would absolutely love to link my Google Forms to Nearpod and be able to take my students right there. Is that working? Just curious. I've never used this. Is anyone still on there?
I tried it, Brooke, but I kept getting an all snap. You know, a little
Oh no. Good to know.
But who knows? It might have just been me.
Okay, so that is